Are you stuck in your house with nothing to do? Erin is here to bake with you. Quarantine Baking with Erin.
Hi, and welcome to Quarantine Baking with Erin. Today we will be making chocolate eclairs. I'm working from a recipe from the Food Network by Gail Gand on the show Sweet Dreams, episode Classic French Desserts, an episode of TV I've never seen, but I used this recipe last week and eclairs are delicious. Also, not that this matters at all, but I was planning on making eclairs before I watched the latest episode of Bake Off. So, I mean, I'm totally on the Bake Off bandwagon, but I was already planning to do this. Okay, so to get started, we're going to use 2 cups of milk. You can use any kind of milk. We keep whole milk in our house, and that's what we're going to use. And we're going to pour that into the saucepan. I am just trusting that this saucepan is big enough because I wanted to use this saucepan because we got it for a couple Christmases ago and I never use it. But I didn't measure, so we'll see. And then we're going to turn this on to, come on, burner. I hate that. It gets like, it's scary. When it takes a minute to click. Okay, we're going to heat the milk and vanilla bean to a boil. Here's the thing. I did buy a vanilla bean, but it's quarantine times, which means it's being tight with the purse string times. And I think we're just gonna use regular vanilla because vanilla beans are so expensive and I'd rather use it in a recipe where it matters. And I made it with just vanilla extract last time and I think it was fine. All right, so we're gonna put in the milk and the vanilla bean, except the vanilla, not vanilla bean. Too expensive. It would be a half vanilla bean, so we can all universally agree that the amount that I just poured in is roughly equivalent to whatever half a vanilla bean is going to be. All right, so normally we'd heat this up and then not to a boil, just to get it warm, right? No, you bring it to a boil and then immediately turn it off. So this is not going to boil anytime soon. And then you would let the warm milk infuse with the vanilla bean, but we're still going to heat it up because I don't know if that part is important or if it's just for the infusing. We're going to assume it's important. Okay, in a bowl with the egg yolks, I've pre-cracked 6 egg yolks. I set aside the whites. I will probably make a pavlova because it is easy and a great thing to do with a bunch of egg whites. So that's in the fridge. So we got our 6 egg yolks and we're gonna put in 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. I put in, the recipe calls for a 1/4 cup, and I thought that would make, you could taste it. It wasn't bad, but I have faith that this custard will thicken up with half the amount of cornstarch. I really should have read this recipe really through before doing this, but you know. When you put in the sugar, with the eggs, yolk, and sugar. You're supposed to put the sugar in for the egg yolks. It's been a while since I've made a video. Okay, 2/3 cup of white granulated sugar into the egg yolks. I also probably should have used a bigger bowl, but you know, you live, you learn. Yeah, this is not optimum whisking because I don't want to make a mess and I don't want to lose any of this egg yolk goodness. Michael is getting down a bowl for me and I'm already committed to the cause. Nope, that's another dish to clean. Thank you, sir. No, thank you. And even more things are going to go in this bowl. It's going to be great. Okay, so we're done. this is what we were making. Wouldn't that be terrible? But a little part of me is like, I bet it's delicious. All right, how's our milk doing? All right, it's hot. It's not boiling. I'm gonna turn it off anyways. I don't know if you need to get the milk to the boil. If that's just to infuse the vanilla, but you're supposed to get it to boil and then cool. So I'm just gonna get it halfway between cool and boiling, and we'll go from there. Okay, now we're gonna put in our 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. I have never seen a recipe call for so much cornstarch. The recipe is from the 90s. I don't know if that's part of it. So we're gonna half that cornstarch and mix it into this teeny tiny bowl that I'm committing to. Any other ingredients? Okay. All right. So once this is incorporated, we are going to take some of our hot milk and put it again into this bowl because we need to combine these two. Michael is really concerned about this. I'm just gonna put a little bit in. The reason we're doing it is because we need to incorporate the eggs and the hot milk together. And if we just put these eggs right into the milk mixture, there is a risk that they might, the eggs will just get cooked and then you'll have gross, chunky scrambled egg badness. So you slowly incorporate the milk into the eggs, and then once you've combined that enough, Michael is really on the edge of his seat being like, why won't you just use another bowl? Because it's you know, coming down to the wire. That's all right. It's also a little bit hard to whisk it quickly enough. All right, Michael, I think you win. I will just use another bowl. Wow. You know what? I would rather have good eclairs than my pride. I think that's an okay principle. Although anybody who's seen this, you're like, wow, Erin, you have pride in your baking. I've seen you completely refuse to put any effort into measuring, reading the instructions, or following the instructions on the off chance that you have read them. All right. This is not a bake-off spoiler, but, well, it's stupid. I'm whisking with my left hand, and Noel went up to one of the contestants the other night and was like, no left-handed person has ever won bake-off. So practicing those ambidextrous skills. All right, this is probably enough milk into the eggs to make sure that when we put the eggs into the milk, they won't cook. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that. I know there's a name for when you do this, but I don't know that name. All right, and we're gonna start whisking. So we really don't want our eggs to cook. It smells so heavenly. All right, so we've got our little milk, egg, custardy goodness. And now we're going to heat it up until it starts to thicken and slowly boil. So I will start constantly while doing that, again, to make sure that the eggs don't cook. But if anybody is an expert in chemistry, if they could tell me why heating this up and cooling it makes it thicken up, I would like to know that. All right, so I'm gonna stir this for a hot minute and we'll check back in. Okay, so I've been stirring this for about 5 minutes. You can tell that it's getting thick because there's like a delay in when I stir it and try and change directions versus like if you were just stirring water, it'd be an easier whirlpool instead of a delayed whirlpool. Those are very fancy technical baking terms. Okay, so if I feel like it's thick enough. The cornstarch is really gonna do a lot of that thickening work, but just to check, we're gonna coat the back of a spoon. We're gonna draw a line in it and see how it's not going back. It's not bleeding into where I drew a line in it. That means it's thick and it doesn't need to custardize anymore. Also, a very fancy technical term that I didn't make up. Okay, so we are now going to strain the custard. This pan's a little bit heavy, so we'll see if I make a mess. I'm gonna strain it into this bowl. This is, you know, if there are any clusters of cornstarch, hopefully not. Hopefully I did a good job stirring it properly, but you never know. Let's make sure I get all the goodness. Also, if you're using your vanilla bean, you probably wouldn't be able to strain out maybe any leftover particles you don't want that aren't just from the inside of the bean. So we'll push that through. It's mostly smooth, but you can see a little bit. It's fine. All right. Thank you, Michael, for the assist in holding the strainer. That's what that's called. And then lastly, we are going to take a tablespoon of butter. I probably did, I'm doing a tablespoon and a half because why not? And so we're going to mix this in. The heat will make it melt and it should be incorporated pretty quickly. A little buttery guy. Yeah, what else is new? I took the bar. It's done. I'm really happy about that. I won't know until December, so I'm just baking away and running and not thinking about the bar. It's almost Halloween, which means it's almost Christmas, which is the best time of the year. Ooh, maybe I'll do some Christmas bakes. I'm just trying to think, like, maybe I'll make a fruitcake. That is not a family tradition of mine, nor do I like fruitcake, but it seems pretty festive. Okay, so that's Neville in the background, always. Okay, the butter is melted. This is a beautiful custard. It's delicious. It's gonna be great. Hopefully this will be thick enough. I think that the last time I made it, it was super thick. It could have been a little runnier, which I know it's like, who wants a runnier custard? But it really was almost doughy. It was so thick. And I don't taste the cornstarch this time, which is great. I would use cling wrap or bees wrap to press down on this custard, but I'm out of cling wrap and my bees wrap is not 100% clean in my baking confession. So we're gonna hope that aluminum foil will do the same job. I think that this will make it take a little bit longer to cool. This is gonna trap the heat in, based on the 4th grade science project I did on insulation, and aluminum foil was a good insulator. But so it might take a couple hours. I'm gonna put it in the fridge for 2, and then we're gonna make the choux pastry. Okay, the custard, as our friends across the pond would say it, is chilled, it's thick, it's great, it's still in the fridge. So we are going to make the choux. Choux, I believe, I read a fun fact today. I think it comes from an old-timey French word for cauliflower, because they used to use this type of pastry to make pastries in the shape of a cauliflower. That's what one of my cookbooks said, so we're gonna go with it. That's a true baking fact. Okay, so we're gonna preheat the oven to 425. And I just learned how to make choux last week, and it was fun. because it's kind of weird. Okay, so we're gonna put in 1 cup of water. We're gonna put in 8 ounces of butter. We're gonna turn our burner on, and we're going to add in, it says a half teaspoon of salt. So we'll just say that that's about a half teaspoon. And then a teaspoon and a half of sugar. Boop. And we are going to let this butter melt and get to a rolling boil, or broiling, as I've now coined it. Oops. And no one wants to watch a pot of butter boil, so we'll check in. All right, so we're gonna say that this is officially rolling boil. So we're gonna turn it off, and I wish that I had a wooden spoon because I'm supposed to do this with a wooden spoon, but you work with what you got. You put in all the flour at once. So this is a cup of flour. We're gonna stir this in. Some really good gush gunk in here. It's very weird looking. It's like mashed potato-y. It's like, voila, you have a pastry, basically. Okay, so we're gonna turn the heat back on. Come on, scary burner. And we're gonna heat it all together for 30 seconds. I'm gonna finish incorporating it because I don't do a magnificent job of stirring things all the way. It's not what I would say I'm known for. Or for keeping track of time in my baking. But it is kind of crazy. It was like, you saw it, it was a bunch of weird goo. And now it's shoe. From goo to shoe! Erin's adventure in baking. Right? Also, I'm not really sure how to spell shoe. It's C-H-O-U-X, I think, but there might also be an I in there because it's a French word. And they put in a bunch of vowels. Okay. So now we're gonna take this, I'm gonna put a pot holder on my hand because it's hot. I'm gonna take this, we're gonna go over to our mixer with a paddle attachment. We're gonna scrape this in. Maybe I should have put the paddle attachment on. Second. All right, so we're gonna put that in. We're gonna get it going. Let me put this back. And we're going to incorporate 3 eggs. Look at that stain. All right, so we're gonna put the egg in while it's mixing, again, to not cook the egg. Wait for it to mix in. Oven's preheated. All right, and before I put in the next one, I'm just gonna turn it off and scrape down the sides. Make sure that all of our choux goodness is getting mixed. All right. So this is gonna be 3 or 4 eggs. It's 3 eggs, and then you check. You want it to be runny enough to work with it, but you don't want it to be too runny. So you want the batter to fall off the beater, but not to be goopy. So last time I made this, I used 4 eggs. Scrape this like when you're served mashed potatoes on Thanksgiving, and then you keep adding butter to make the mashed potatoes a little less thick. That's kind of what the consistency is going towards. Let's make sure this is all combined. I don't know if I wouldn't quite say that I'm gonna add a 4th egg. I'm just gonna go for it. It doesn't seem quite runny enough. That's what I did last time, and it was, I think, right. So we'll do that again. And we're just gonna trust the pastry to be all that we need it to be. I hope this is right. Okay, that's, all right. Hesitantly falling off the paddle. That's what we're looking for. Okay, scrape all this off. Because you need this to be goopy enough because we're about to pipe it. All right, let's take this back to this part of the kitchen. Okay, so I've got a pan with parchment paper, and I've got a little piping bag. I think ideally I would have a much wider tip, but I have what I have, so we're gonna just pipe our best. Or do I want to pipe without a tip? I think I'm gonna use this for my filling, and I'm gonna pipe without a tip if I can reach my piping bags. All right, let me find some scissors. Because last time I piped the shoe, and because I was working then also with too small of a tip, I couldn't get like the consistency in drawing one straight line. I had to like, I don't know, it was a little bit of a mess. We'll see how this goes. Okay. Put this shoe in here, and we're going to pipe lengths about the size of a jumbo hot dog. So let's see how that goes. How hot? That's a tiny hot dog, but that's all right. And you should get between 8 and 12. And most importantly, they should be consistent. So I might actually end up piping another tray because I think these are going to be a little bit too tiny. But that just means more eclairs. So last time I piped these, I wanted to work on consistency. I still need to work on consistency. These are probably a little too close together, but I would rather have eclairs that I have to saw apart than miss out on some potential eclairs. I'm not gonna waste any of this shoe. So these are gonna go into the oven for 15 minutes at 425, and then we're gonna drop that temperature down to 350, I think? No, to 325 for the remaining 25. So I will set a timer. we'll check back in. Also, don't open your oven. These babies gotta rise. They can't take an influx of cool air. So, check back. Okay, so our 15-minute timer has gone off. Basically, from what I understand, the first 15 minutes is when you are going to get the nice rise out of the shoe. And then the last 25 are to cook it thoroughly. Unfortunately, I played myself and I forgot to put an egg wash on the Eclairs, so they're not going to be as beautiful. I think they will be okay. And that's like half of when I bake. I'm like, oh, I forgot this important but minor step because it wasn't, you know, as sexy as the other steps. All right, so not only did I not put on the egg wash, you saw it. I forgot to turn the oven down when I was like, it's time to turn the oven down. So I caught it about halfway through the bake and I reduced the baking time by a couple of minutes and I lowered the oven temperature. So these are gonna be a little bit more brown than they are golden brown, but that's all. All right, so we've got little tray number 1. Little tray number 2. So these need to cool completely before we pipe them. But before I pipe them, I'm going to poke, where's my pastry bag? Here it is. I'm gonna poke each end of the hot pastry with a piping tip. You know, I'm gonna wait till they're a little cooler because they're too hot to touch. But yeah, I'll wait. So these are basically cool because they're a little overdone. It was harder to use one of these tips to poke holes in both ends. So I don't know if the pastry will get, or sorry, the cream will get distributed as evenly throughout the pastry, but we'll see. There are a number of ways you could do it. Some people do holes in the top and then cover the top with whatever. We're gonna cover our tops with chocolate. Maybe I'll try that in the future, but last time piping the ends worked so well that, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Except, do everything a little bit differently each time because variety is the spice of life. Okay, our custard, all right. Okay, so don't mind the fire alarm. That seems like I'm avoiding fire safety, but I'm not. It's just, we got some construction going on downstairs. Okay, so you might have seen me have a little bit of sadness about the state of my filling, which is true. I am sad. But I learned that you really do need that much cornstarch, and it doesn't taste that bad. So, because my custard is so runny, which is, and my pastry is overdone, and all of that goes to show is that baking isn't perfect, and that's another thing that I truly do like about baking, even though it very frequently makes me sad, is that, you know, it keeps me humble, and you never know what you're gonna get. And so I am kind of haphazardly trying to get this drippy filling into these Eclairs. But these Eclairs are just for me. They weren't for, you know, like my wedding or something. Can you imagine? That would have been sad. And I'm just gonna keep piping these little babies. See, it's just running through so quickly. That's all right. We're gonna develop some new turbo piping methods, and these are going to be messy. At the end of the day, it's just pastry. It's just pastry. All right, so I'll keep piping these, and then we'll move on to the chocolate. Okay, so now that I've thoroughly messed up the cream filling, the custard filling, and the pastry itself, we're gonna try to make the chocolate. This should, oh, come on, there we go. This should not go wrong because it's very easy, but I'm having one of those kinds of days, and so if I goof this, that's just gonna be what it is. Okay, so I'm putting in a half cup of heavy cream, and I'm putting in 2/3 cups of baking chocolate quality semi-sweet chocolate chips. And so what we're gonna do is melt the chocolate in the cream. See how that goes. Last time I took a lot of time to chop them to get them to melt more quickly, because smaller parts will, you know, they're not giant chocolate chips, they'll melt more quickly. But I don't think that that's really necessary. But then again, I'm omitting all kinds of things from this recipe, and it hasn't turned out fantastic today. So that's right. So basically what's gonna happen is we're gonna melt this chocolate, and then it will become the chocolate to cover the top of the Eclairs. Okay, so you can see, look, chocolate, melted chocolate and heavy cream. So far, so good. In an ideal world, you would be able to take the eclair and dip it in, but because the filling is so runny, I don't want to tip the eclair. So we're gonna spoon it on, and it's gonna be messy. Michael's like, ooh, I can see the chocolate going right onto the burner. It's gonna, yeah, this has been a messy day in baking. Ideally, you would cover up your holes. And then once this is on, it should take like, I don't know, chill it at room temperature. Just let it harden and get shiny for about an hour. I don't know if we'll wait the full hour, but we'll check back in.
All right, folks, it's time for the final verdict. Now, this just goes to show you there were some bumps along the way, but I guarantee this is going to be delicious. I'm very pleased about this.
All right. Oh, Michael ate the whole thing. Okay, time for me to try mine.
Get some.
Okay, actually much better than I thought it would be. I think today I just got sad because there are very few things in our control right now, and so when I goof up something that's completely in control, I'm like, nothing can ever go right again. So obviously, I would have baked the pastry right, and I would have put in the correct amount of cornstarch instead of reducing it. But I still think that this is...
It's incredible.
It's a 6 out of 10.
It's delicious.
You know, it's a quality recipe. Poor to fair execution. So I'm gonna give it a 6.
I'm obviously giving it a 10 because I get to eat it.
Bye!
Well, are you stuck in your house with nothing to do? Erin is here to bake with you. Quarantine baking with Erin.
Okay, the custard is probably, it was not a good impression. Cut!